Coming up on Bang, Marry, Kill, journalist Ted Rowlands talks to us about his experience during the Scott Peterson investigation, his experience during the trial. He was there. Who killed Laci and Connor Peterson? Ted Rowlands gives us his final verdict. That's coming up next. Laci Peterson was a 27-year-old woman from Modesto, California, who was 8 months pregnant when she went missing on December 24th. Yes, Christmas Eve, 2002. Her disappearance quickly attracted national attention, partly due to her pregnancy, but also just the mysterious circumstances surrounding her case. Her husband, Scott Peterson, claimed he last saw her that morning before he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina. When Laci did not return home, he reported her missing. The investigation into her disappearance quickly focusing on Scott, especially after inconsistencies in his statements. The police also learned, and this was the bombshell that Nancy Grace always, the bombshell tonight, this is the bombshell, that Scott had been having an affair with a woman named Amber Frey, who was unaware that Scott was married or that Laci was pregnant. On April 13th, 2003, the remains of a male fetus washed ashore on the San Francisco Bay, followed by the discovery of a female body. This body was later identified as Laci's on April 14th, 2003. The location of both bodies near where Scott said he had been fishing on Christmas Eve. Scott Peterson was arrested on April 13th in La Jolla, California, near the Mexico border. He was charged with 2 counts of murder, one for Laci and one for Connor, their baby boy, the fetus. The trial began in 2004 and garnered unbelievable media attention. The prosecution argued that Scott killed Laci because he wanted to be free from his marriage and loathed the idea of becoming a father. The defense claimed there was no direct evidence linking Scott to the murders. On November 12, 2004, Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for Connor's. He was sentenced to death on March 16, 2005, and sent to San Quentin State Prison to await execution. His case has gone through various appeals, and in August of 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence due to concerns over jury selection, though his conviction was upheld. In December 2021, Peterson was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, the LA Innocence Project is controversially working to free Scott Peterson through a new DNA test. How about no? Laci Peterson's murder remains one of the most high-profile criminal cases in American history, likely due to the extensive media coverage and tragic nature of the crime, but also just the mystery that continues to surround it. So much so that there are 2 brand new docuseries available on the murders: Netflix's American Murder, Laci Peterson, and Peacock's Face to Face with Scott Peterson. CourtTV's Ted Rowlands is featured in both of those documentaries and breaks down all the unanswered questions. Ted Rowlands, Court TV anchor, you are featured in 2 new docuseries about the murder of Laci Peterson, Netflix's American Murder, Laci Peterson, and Peacock's Face to Face with Scott Peterson. You are my favorite Ted. My second favorite is Ted Lasso. And this is probably an overshare, but because you are my friend and because you're my favorite Ted, whenever I am surprised by you on TV, I snap a picture of it. There's just like a gallery of pictures of you in my phone. I think that's probably weird, but I'm so proud of my friend for all of his success.
Well, we've known each other a long time, Kins, and that makes me feel good. Did you snap a photo?
I know. It's just I'm constantly surprised at your reach when it comes to the true crime community. And honestly, it's probably this Scott Peterson case that thrust you into this space. Did you ever think that, true crime was going to be where you really excelled?
When I was a local reporter in the San Francisco Bay Area, I had a couple stories. Scott Peterson was one of them, but before that, there was another one, the Yosemite murder case that I covered extensively and was able to get an interview with this guy. That's when I really fell in love with the, because when you're a local reporter, you're covering floods and fires and what have you. But whenever there was a crime story, I raised my hand. And it, for whatever reason, for me, especially courtroom drama, it's the ultimate, because it is life and death, and you're trying to determine who's lying, who's telling the truth. It's fascinating. And so by the time I got to Peterson, I was already focused on that as my hopeful career ambition.
That's incredible. How did you get involved because did you just say you were in San Francisco at the time?
Yes.
So
so we
a bit away from where Laci was? How did you get involved in this case?
Well, it was a slow news day. It was December 26th, the day after Christmas. There's nothing going on, where normally we wouldn't cover Modesto. It's too far, about an hour and a half. We get this flyer, missing pregnant lady, and there's this picture of this beautiful woman, and hey, let's go, and let's see what's going on here. And it was the Christmas holiday season. As soon as you saw her picture, you're immediately drawn to it. So we were, as a newsroom, we're like, oh yeah, this is an interesting story, that hopefully she's fine. And we went down there thinking we'd maybe by the time we got there she'd be found, or the next day it would be a one-day kind of journey. Who knew 20 years later it'd still be talking about it.
Well, we are going to talk about Laci, but really quickly, I believe it was in the Netflix I watched both back to back, but one thing I had not heard before was Scott's sister-in-law say that she had a family member that was in public relations. And the reason they felt like it caught fire so quickly was because they had this powerhouse PR expert that had sent out a press release. And so that was really interesting to me, because I'd never heard that aspect before. Did you know that?
No, and yeah, I learned that as well. It makes sense though, because the media was onto the story very quickly. And that would make sense. Again, it's from Christmas to New Year's in a local news environment, there is not much going on
Right.
because people are at home enjoying time with family. So there was a lot of factors, I think, that went into the immediate attention that this case got. And in my opinion, number one was Laci, and just that photo of this beautiful pregnant woman, and you wonder, where is she?
Right. Well, tell me about Laci. She was so cute. I've never heard a single negative word about her. And despite that horrible ending, I always associate her with a smile on her face. Like the way you're describing her, that is always how I'm going to remember her. And it's not always like that for victims.
Not at all. And sadly, in a lot of cases that don't get attention, it's because you don't have that smiling victim or that person that catches your attention and creates empathy. But yeah, to a person, she was that person that lit up a room and was, she was the opposite of a wallflower. She's very smile on her face, but also very engaged, if you will. And I think that she was fierce. Her mother would tell stories about, you wouldn't want to go up against her because she was a strong-willed person, but she made an impression on everybody that she encountered.
One of the points you make in, I believe it was the Netflix series, is there was a lack of evidence when it came to kind of the generic thing, blood. There's no blood spatter. What was missing from this case? What would investigators be looking for that they truly lacked?
There was a lot missing. And when you take Scott Peterson's behavior out of the equation, and I think the LA Innocence Project is sort of doing that, and that's why they have gravitated to it. There's not a lot there. The bodies is the number one thing being found in the bay, and the Peterson family, Scott, they maintain that was because it was public knowledge right away that he went fishing in the bay. So whoever actually had her dumped her in the bay to frame Scott. The problem, of course, with alternative theories in this case is that they're harder to believe than that Scott did it. But what's missing is that physical evidence. how did he kill her? When did he kill her? And how did he, in a very short period of time, and his window's pretty short from the time that Laci's on the phone with her mother the night before until the police are called eventually the next day. He doesn't have a ton of time to kill her, dispose of her body, and then also be on the internet at his workshop and at the house. Someone's on the computer. The prosecutors maintain it was Scott pretending to be Laci. There's the deeper you look into this case, the more questions you have. And when this trial started, I remember sitting there in the courtroom going, okay, here we go. We're going to see all this evidence against Scott. And it was compelling, but it wasn't the physical evidence that I thought that they would have. And investigators knew they didn't have it. But the other part of the equation was so compelling. His behavior, his affair, they had enough, and they knew they had enough for a conviction.
Daily Beast said, in Face to Face with Scott Peterson, the results are, to put it mildly, less than convincing. What was your initial reaction? You talk about his behavior. I felt in this interview that he continued to lack self-awareness. Why can't you cry or be angry? I mean, you've had 20 years to think about how you reacted incorrectly. This was your chance to fix, to correct that, and it just felt like he lacked any sort of not compassion. He lacked any sort of enthusiasm for his innocence in case.
Absolutely. He was the same guy that he was 20 years ago when I interviewed him. It's this show he's putting on, and it's fake. There was nothing real in these interviews that Shireen Anderson did with him on the Zoom calls, and it came through. He was the same. Oh, no big deal. It's nonsense.
Lethargic.
Yeah. There wasn't the I didn't do it. I want everyone to know I didn't do it. Not even a hint of it. And to me, after watching both the documentaries, which I thought they were both very well done, he did it, is my feeling. You can get caught up on the details of what's missing and how he might not have done it, but when you factor in him and then the interviews that he did, it's pretty apparent, in my opinion, that
I love that. That was my last question. Way to jump the gun, but thanks so much. Okay, so I watched your one-on-one interview with Scott. You're in your socks. I've known you for a long time, Ted. I've never seen you without your shoes on. Can you please explain those circumstances to me?
Yeah, he had rules. So we show up to do this interview, and he's in charge from the very beginning. It's timed, one light only, and no shoes in the house. So my photographer and I both, all right, take our shoes off, and he's got it set up where he wants us to sit. It's timed, and he had all his answers ready to roll. In fact, a couple questions didn't even get to. It's like, oh, I know you're going to ask me this, and he'd give me the answer. And we walked out of there thinking, all right, well, he didn't tell us anything, but the way he conducted himself it spoke volumes.
Well, also, your wife and baby are missing and presumed dead, and you're worried about my shoes on your carpet? Like, isn't that's so weird to me?
Yeah, no, and that's from the very beginning. His behavior was so off of what you would normally think a person in this situation would be exhibiting. The first time I met him was on the 26th. We went to his home at 7 a.m. We had been doing live reports outside of his house, but it was dark out, didn't want to bother him till the sun rose. And from that moment on, he was very uninterested in being on camera. And that makes sense because he had Amber Frey over in another city. So, but it was the acting cool.
I say, but at the same time, I'm going to interrupt you. At the same time, so what about your mistress if your
right?
wife
Absolutely, yeah. He should be, like, hey, I've been with this girl, but I didn't do that. We need to find my wife. Yeah. And there was none of that.
Yeah,
none of that. It was the opposite. And his upbringing, he was always the perfect kid, and I think that he really was one of those, because the stories about him are compelling. Like, he was the kid that would help the neighbor. He was, at a very young age, seemed to always do the right thing, and adults liked him. He was friendly and kind, all these great attributes that the family lived through and they hold on to. And that's why they believe it is innocence. They just can't believe he did it. But I also think there's a bit of a I am perfect scenario, and he couldn't get divorced if you think he killed her, that this was weirdly a better option to keep his reputation of being Mr. Perfect.
Well, and people would sympathize with him because his wife was murdered or disappeared. So, we feel so sorry for you. You're still elevated. Yeah, you're right. Because his mom talks about how when she first met him, he not only brought Laci flowers, he brought Laci's mother flowers. I mean, that's the dream guy, right?
It's a massive red flag for a dad like I am. If some guy shows up and it's the Eddie Haskell too much, the used car salesman. If some guy is going out of his way to be that guy for other guys, you're like, what is wrong with that dude? And he was putting on a show, always putting on a show.
Yeah, that's true. You testified in the trial, correct?
No, I did not.
You didn't? Oh, I thought you did. That's interesting.
Yeah, I testified in the Stainer case. But not in this one. I didn't testify. My calls with him were played in the courtroom. Yeah,
that's what I think. That's where I think my confusion is. That's so interesting. He says
in fact, at one point there was a very important call between him and Amber, and it dropped, because I was calling, and I was sitting in the courtroom, and the investigator said, yeah, we lost that call because Ted Rowlands was calling in. And the prosecutor said, he called a lot, didn't he? He's like, yeah, he sure did. And so everybody turns around and looks at me, and I'm like, sorry. And the courtroom,
that's the sign of a good reporter. That's somebody that stays on top of it. All right, he said during the Peacock special, I didn't kill my family. This surprised me because I felt like for the most part, he never acknowledged Connor. Like Connor was something that you had to remind him of. There's a baby involved. Is that true, or is my memory not correct there?
No, I think that in the interviews, and the family had stories about that too as well, that there didn't seem to be this feel of loss for his child. In fact, they, in one of the specials, Sharon shared that I think it was Sharon or maybe the investigators, he kind of turned the nursery into a storage room and didn't, but maintained to other people that he didn't go in there because it was, too hard for him. Yet in reality, he was throwing stuff in there and didn't seem to acknowledge that. Let's face it, the great thing about these documentaries, because over the years there's been lots of speculation of what's missing in this case. The LA Innocence Project comes in, he's proclaiming his innocence, his family's behind him. I think these documentaries, even the Peacock one, which just takes a more pro-Scott look at the case, I think at the end of both of them, you watch and you're like, he did it.
This feels really okay. Let me tell you when I made that face was when I found out at the conference in Anaheim where he meets the friend of Amber Frey that introduces Amber Frey to Scott. He's wearing a horny bastard name tag.
Yeah.
I mean, this it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like he must have been two completely different people, away from his wife, away from his wife's family.
Right. Yeah. And when she is all alone at the Christmas party, sitting in the chair, and he's at another Christmas party in Fresno with a Santa Claus hat on with his girlfriend. Oh, it is
Mr. Good Time, Mr. And also, could you believe in the Peacock special, he says that Amber Frey exaggerated their relationship. There's evidence to say otherwise. You're not calling her, pretending you're in Paris on New Year's Eve when you're in the middle of a vigil for your missing wife and child, unless you are in a relationship. You don't care to let her know what's going on. You don't call her as often as you do.
No, and his own words. He's on the phone with her saying, yeah, I could see myself with you, have a beautiful life together. It's on tape. I mean, there's no exaggeration at all. Amber Frey is the hero in this case, because without her, even with the bodies, it was going to be a much tougher sell. And Mark Garagos is a fantastic attorney. He did a great job in trial. I think, you pull Amber out of it and her recordings, I don't know that they get a guilty verdict.
And one of the questions that like killed me that she didn't ask him is he justifies the ID by saying he gets a golf, when we think he's on his way to Mexico, he says he's just hanging out in San Diego with his family. Okay. He says he uses his brother's ID for a golf discount. Weird, but okay. Dyes his hair to avoid harassment. Okay, well, these are convenient excuses. I'm buying it. Why does she not ask, then what is the Viagra for? Your wife is potentially dead. Your mistress is no longer talking to you. And you've hit the streets with 10K in cash. How, as a journalist, do you not ask that question? And I know you're nice and you're not going to criticize, but I guess my question is, would you like to know the answer to that?
Yeah, the Viagra was another head scratcher. The whole thing, there's so many of these that he explains away or tries to explain away, and at different times, and just that it wasn't really featured in the documentaries, but one of the compelling, in my mind, parts of the investigation was that after it died down just a little bit, maybe 3 weeks later after Laci went missing, he upgraded his cable system and the porn channel. He subscribed to like the hardcore porn channel while his wife has only been missing for 3 weeks. And that came out at trial. So again, to the Viagra talk, I think he had a whole weird life going on the
I mean,
side.
both documentaries should have included that, because I would have been like pausing, texting everyone I know, like, this is crazy. I can't even believe this. All right, you mentioned the LA Innocence Project. I won't keep you for much longer. Thank you so much for your time. But you mentioned the LA Innocence Project. They're arguing that Scott didn't receive a suitable defense, despite the fact that I thought his defense attorney was amazing. And that reasonable doubt remains about his guilt, most of it revolving around a neighborhood burglary. Where does that stand now? Do you think the LA Innocence Project has a chance? And why are they taking on this case? That so many people are angry about this.
Yeah, and the LA Innocence Project is different than Barry Scheck's Innocence Project, the National Innocence Project, which has a long track record of exonerating innocent people. This is a relatively new organization with competent attorneys, and hey, to have them on your side is fantastic. Why this case? I think it goes back to, if you read the transcript of this case, if you look at the facts, it does give you pause. And some of the things that the defense chose not to do because they thought they were doing well, which they weren't, that was a problem, included not having any of those eyewitnesses come in and testify and say that they definitely saw Laci walking in the neighborhood. Because if the juror believes one of them, it's over because the timing doesn't work. Right now, the LA Innocence Project is really hoping that there's a piece of duct tape, 15-inch long piece of duct tape, which is on Laci's pant leg when she was recovered. Her remains were recovered. That's being tested. Originally, it was tested and there was DNA shown there, but they couldn't pull a profile because of the testing abilities back then. And so they're retesting it with the court's permission. If that comes back and it shows some person's DNA, it could give them leverage to maybe catch the attention of the court, and he has a small chance of maybe getting a retrial. At the end of the day, I don't know that trying this again. I know Laci Peterson has said several times that if they retry Scott Peterson, they'll never get a guilty verdict. I'm not convinced of that because Gloria Allred has made it very clear that Amber Frey is ready to roll if need be, and all the evidence is still there. So we'll see. The fact that the LA Innocence Project has it, good on them, I guess. Good, but I could understand why people are thinking, why use these resources for someone who didn't get a real fair chance. You can't argue with a straight face.
Resources for somebody who's not upgrading their porn subscription. Okay.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, really, you had Mark Garagos and a team of lawyers. This was fair. this was a fair battle.
Absolutely. All right. My last question, aside from, I'm going to ask you about victim to verdict, but I was going to say, I still think he's guilty as hell. Sounds like you still think he's pretty guilty. All these, and actually what surprises me is because when I asked you this around the Jodi Arias trial, you said to me, there are a lot of holes. And so I assumed that you were kind of on the fence, but it sounds to me like you really do think he is guilty.
Over the years, I've gone back and forth with in terms, because if you get obsessed with the holes in the case, you can get your, thinking, wow, maybe this is like a 1 in a million that he actually didn't do it, but he's insane. Um, it, Over time, a couple things have happened. No one else has come forward. If someone else did do it, these wacko burglar guys, the fact that they could keep this under wraps and their immediate families, that the chances of that are low, in my opinion. And as times has gone by, especially with these interviews that we just watched, he hasn't changed. He is still this weird person that seems vacant. And okay, the guy who's weird, who's vacant, who's lying on the phone about being in Paris, his wife is dead. Yeah, because he probably killed her. So
Okay.
I do. I'm back on right now after watching these docs. I'm like, oh, he did it.
Welcome
And my
back.
wife is
Welcome
like,
back to our
I've
side.
been telling you. My wife hates it when I'm like, when I even talk about the case in a way that is remotely suggesting that there's a chance he's not guilty.
Oh,
So
she shuts you
she's
down.
loving
You're on
these
the
docs.
couch.
Yeah.
Tell me about your all new season of Victim to Verdict on Court TV. I cannot wait. My TiVo is set.
All right. Yeah, we have our first episode of 6 airs September 8th, and it's going to be Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. We're basically taking cases from the last year and a half, boiling them down. And, we have great interviews with Camille Vasquez and Johnny's defense team, Ben Chu. And then we have the 6 great episodes. Kyle Rittenhouse is one of them. It's going to be a great series, and we're really looking forward to season 2, Sunday nights, 8 o'clock, I believe.
That's right.
On Court TV, starting September 8th.
Oh my gosh. Ted, you're you're my favorite Ted, but you're one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and congratulations on all of your success. I am your biggest fan.
Oh, thank you, Kins. And likewise, I love being on with you. And it's always a bear. I never forget sitting in that courtroom for the Jodi Arias trial, trying not to laugh at your comments. You're one of the most entertaining people I've ever been around. So
Oh, thank
glad
you,
to be
sir.
with you.